This will be a quick review of scientific notation. Scientific notation. And it is good that you understand this because you will be off to high school next year. They do use this in all of your whatever science classes of your biology and all that good stuff because we have to deal with all those super small, super big things. Remember, when you have a number, first of all, let's look at two examples. You have a big number like 67 million, and you have a small number like 0.000053. The rules of scientific notation, I won't make you write them down because they're pretty simple. Remember, you make the number, move the decimal so that the number becomes between 1 and 10. So it actually ends up being just to the right of the first non-zero digit, 6.7, remember that? And just write times 10. And then however many places you move the decimal, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is your exponent of 10. You know, if you broke it all down, you're saying this is 6.7 times 1 million. And if you did 6.7 times a million, you get this number here. How is that different than this one? Well, the only thing is you're moving the decimal in the other direction. You put the decimal between the 5 and the 3, then 5.3 times 10. But the difference in that is that negative. When you count the decimal places, you have to make the exponent negative, whatever that is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because what is, this is why, because what is 10 to the negative 6? If I were simplifying that, how do you make a negative exponent positive?
You flip it over a fraction.
Right. This is like this now, but to make it positive, it'd be 1 over 10 to the 6th power. 1 over 10 to the 6th power is 1/1,000,000th. If you were to multiply this, if you were to multiply 5.3 times 1/1,000,000th, you'll end up with that number. So now, how does that help us? Well, we have to discuss what do we do when we work calculations with scientific notation. For example, we'll do 2 examples because I know we do it in 7th grade because I just got done doing it. We just done did it not too terribly long ago. Oh, I hate some of the problems. You know, I'm going to make my own up because I don't like what they do. If you have 6.3 times 10 to the 5th, and you're multiplying that by 3.0 times 10 to the 8th power. Dost thou remember the rules to this?
Yes.
Good. You multiply the 2 left ones. We probably did it this year, right? 6.3 times 3, you get 18.9. Times 10, how do I know what the exponent of 10 is?
You add them together.
Right. When you multiply bases together, you add exponents together. So 8 plus 5 is 13. And then unfortunately you would get that problem wrong. Brant, why?
Because it's not between the two, the first 2 numbers.
Yeah, so what's my fix, Brant?
Move it over and
I do move it over, but here's where people go wrong. See, this should be a big old asterisk in your notes. If you make this number smaller, you have to make this number bigger. If you make this number bigger, you make this one smaller. It kind of is a balancing act. I move this one place that way, so I made it one smaller, so I have to add 1 and make this one bigger. 1.89 times 10 to the 14. And that is different from division, 6.3 times 10 to the 5th power over 3 times 10 to the 8th power. Carter Westfall, how is division different than multiplication?
For multiplication, you're
Multiplying.
it,
And
for
division,
division,
you're
dividing it.
Yeah, but let's look at it. Okay, so I divide 3 into 6.3, which is 2.1, right? But here's where we got to make a little difference here. What about my exponent of 10?
Don't you subtract them?
You do. So my answer is,
That would be -4, -3.
very good. I take the bottom one away, so it's 5 minus 8, and you do get 10 to the -3rd power. Nice work, Westfall. Look at him go. Let it be duly noted that he's got that. Very good. Good, that was our review there. Now, blank piece of paper because this is where things get a little tricky. And put on top greatest common factor. Your world is about to be rocked. Life was simple when we had this. What's the greatest common factor of 18 and 24? What is the greatest common factor of 18 and 24? Remember, factors are not multiples.
6.
Is it 6? Sure, I'll go with that. Equals 6. We're good with that. However, ladies and gentlemen, life will slap you in the face when they ask you this. What's the greatest common multiple of, or common factor of, 6a squared b cubed and 6a squared b cubed and 8a squared b squared c. 8a squared b squared c. Anybody jumping on that bandwagon? Without looking in the book. Evelyn says
2a squared b squared.
2a squared b squared. Anybody agreeing with that?
No, that's
Evelyn agrees with herself. I believe she's right. But here is, listen carefully to me. This I am going to give you probably the most, I can't say complicated. You shouldn't have to do what I tell you here once you understand what this is. But I am going to give you the way that works no matter what you're doing. Okay, but eventually my goal is for you to do what Evelyn just did and go, yeah, it's 2a squared b squared. But here's the steps. Okay, and I don't expect that you'll have to do this for very long. Step number 1 is you need to prime factorize. Okay, and if I'm prime factorizing this, that just means what times what? So you end up with 2 times 3. If I prime factorize a squared, I get a times a. And prime factorizing b cubed, I get b times b times b. With me, that's that whole thing broken down. If I prime factorize 8a squared b squared, I end up with 2 times 2 times 2 times a times b times c. Again, just bear with me. In the end, this will not be that long. Got that, Westfall?
Yes, sir.
I know you do. Now, number 2, what you do is you take what each group has in common. In other words, you compare each group and you say, what do they both have? Okay, when you look at 2's, they both have in common one single 2. Okay, this one has 3, but this one doesn't have 3, it only has 1. Do they both have a 3? No, so you can't say there's no 3s, there's no other common things. Looking at the A's, what do they have in common?
both have 2 A's.
They both have 2 A's, so you take 2 A's. Looking at B's, what do they have in common?
They both have 2.
This one has 2, this one has 3, so they both have 2. It's what they have in common. And looking at C's, this one doesn't have a C, so you can't take any, they don't have any C's in common. And then, step 3 is remultiply, which gives you 2a squared b squared. Another way to think about it is, when it comes to letters, you take the group that has the fewest of the letters. In other words, okay, they both had a squared, so that's the fewest they both had. This had b cubed, but this had b squared. That's the fewest they have. This one didn't have a c, so that's the fewest they have. You can take none, and then you just do the least common, or the greatest common factor of 6 and 8. Let's look at another one. Let's look at this one. How about this one? 8c to the fourth d squared e. 8c to the fourth d squared e. And 12c cubed d4 e squared. 12c4, what did I say, d cubed e squared.
Is that D?
Second. So your greatest common factor, and again, you don't, unless you don't understand this, you don't really have to prime factorize. You can just look at this and go, as far as numbers, 8 and 12, what's the greatest common factor of 8 and 12? 4. 4 is the biggest number that goes into both of those. Looking at the C's, which group has the fewest C's?
Yes, sir.
They both have c to the fourth, so that's the fewest they have. Looking at the D's, which group has the fewest D's?
D squared.
D squared. And then looking at the E's, which one is the, I think I wrote something down wrong. I'm sure I did.
The normal E.
Yeah, oh yeah, the E, normal E is right there. This is your greatest common factor. Now, here's the unfortunate thing that they're going to ask you to do. They are going to ask you to factor this phrase right here, watch. 8c to the fourth d squared e minus 12c to the fourth d cubed e squared. They are going to ask you to factor that. Where? Let's rewind just for a second here. Back in the day, remember when we used to do this 8x minus 4, and they asked you to factor, and you took out the greatest common factor, which in this case was a, what's the biggest number that goes into both of those? 4. Then you divide that out, and you say 4 times what gives you 8x, 2x, 4 times what gives you 4, 1. Well, that's the same thing we're doing here, except it's a little bit more complicated. We already found the greatest common factor. We are going to factor that out. So you write that down. You write 4c to the fourth d squared e, and then you're going to have parentheses with whatever's left when you take that out of there. So, start with your numbers. To go from 8 to 4, it's 2, right? 2 times 4 is 8. You already have the c to the fourth, you already have the d squared, you already have the e. So this is all you need to represent this first term here. But then I go to this. I put minus because there's a minus there. 4 times what is 12? 3. C to the fourth is already there. To go from d squared to d cubed, you're going to need a d. And to go from e to e squared, you're going to need an e. So you end up with that 4c to the fourth d squared e times 2 minus 3 d blah 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 blah. That is crazy. I'm afraid to go any farther, actually.
It's chaos. Not hard, just confusing.
All right, here comes the deductive leap as to why you need to do this. Okay? If you come up with a problem that looks like this, and your answer, the directions are just to simplify, and you end up with this, 3x plus 3 over 3. And I'm asked to simplify that. Any guesses to what that simplified is?
3x.
It is not 3x.
X plus 3.
It is not x plus 3.
3x. I said that.
Come on, Evelyn. This is where you anybody?
Well, you gotta find the greatest common. So you bet it comes in 1.
Yeah, there's a good point there. Why would we do this if this did come into play? First of all, listen to me. Okay? Some of you said, oh, I'm just going to cross off these 3's, and that's where I got 3x. And then other people said, well, I'm going to cross off these 3's, and I get x plus 3. You can't do that. You watch this.
X plus 1.
8 plus 2 over 2. We know what the answer to that is, right? What's 8 plus 2?
10.
Divided by 2 is 5. You know your answer has to be 5. Which means, this is not a true statement. I can't just say, oh, there's a 2, cross them off, because then I get 8 as my answer. Nor could I say that 2 goes into 8 4 times, and 4 plus 2 is my answer, because that doesn't work either. Here's the deal. Listen very carefully. In order to cross-cancel, things must be factors of each other. They must be, did I spell that? Factors on top or on bottom. In other words, this is a sum. This is an adding thing. I can't just willy-nilly go crossing things off with adding things. They have to be multiplying things. And that's why they showed you what to do when you factored out, because when you factor things, you make them factors. What can I factor out of the top, out of these two things? A 3. I can take a 3 out of both these and be left with, take a 3 out of this, you're left with x, take a 3 out of this, you're left with 1. Now see, these two things are factors of each other. And if they're factors, then you can cross off anything on the bottom that's a factor with that. Okay? If I would have an x plus 1 on the bottom, I could cross off that x plus 1 with that x plus 1 because this is a factor, and that would also be a factor. But I don't have the x plus 1, I have the 3. My answer is, when I cross this out and simplify it, just x plus 1. Now going back to this, how would that work over here? Well, obviously, I could just add and do it, but what could I take out of an 8 and a 2? A 2. If I factor out a 2, I'm left with 4 plus 1. The 2's would cross off, and guess what? 4 plus 1 is the 5 that I should have got when I got over there. Enough examples, and I think this will still be confusing to you. Watch this one. 5x minus 25x squared. 5x minus 25x squared all over 5xy. And the directions again say to simplify. So the first thing probably to do is understand that the bottom, these are factors of each other. If you could find a factor on top with a 5, it would cross off, an x on top, and a y would cross off. But these are not factors on top. This is a subtraction problem. You're going to have to factor something out and get some parentheses before you make things factors. Is it locked?
I didn't know the secret password.
Is it locked?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be locked. Is it locked now? Maybe it popped. Miss Alita, I assume the chili was from you. That looks tasty.
Did you eat it already?
No, I put it in the fridge.
Oh, I thought you ate
I
it.
said it looks tasty.
It is. It's got that secret ingredient.
Oh, I
too.
love the secret sauce.
Yep.
Alright, so on top, ladies and gentlemen, you have to look and say, what can I factor out of this?
5x.
A 5 and an x. You take a 5 and an x out, what are you left with? Well, you have a 1 there. Don't forget about the 1. 5x times what gives you 25x squared? Well, 5 times 5 is 25, and x times x is that. Now, these are all factors of each other. You have a 5, that's a factor of the x, that's a factor with that. This is a 5, that's a factor with the x, that's a factor with the y. I can cross off the 5 with the 5 on the bottom. I can cross off the x with the x on the bottom. The y I can't cross off, so it has to stay. You're left with the y on the bottom and the 1 minus 5x on top. That's as much as you can simplify that. But it is simplified. This is crazy. I know you want a super duper hard one.
I do.
Tell me what you get for this. We'll do one more. 18 x plus 45x cubed. 18x plus 45x cubed all over 9x. See if you can't simplify that. I will give you 10 seconds. If you don't get it today, there's a good chance you may get it tomorrow. If you don't get it tomorrow, there's an outside chance the next day. Answers we have? Some. Hopefully we get some.
Oh, I wrote the wrong thing.
Oh, that's a shame.
I didn't write the wrong thing. No, exactly. Why is 35 not going to anything right down the wrong problem?
35 does.
No, 35 wasn't a 5.
Gauss, what'd you come up with?
2 plus 5x squared.
Let's see if it works. 2 plus 5x squared. So what can you factor out at the top? Well, you can take a 9 and an x out, which leaves you with a 2 plus 9 times 5 and an x squared there. And now because these are factors, this cross off with that, and 11 2 plus 5x squared. Amen. Amen.